The manager's voice was polite. That was the part that stayed with people who were there. It was October 1959, and the First National Bank of Kingman, Arizona, had the kind of lobby that smelled like floor wax and old paper. The kind of place where the ceiling fans turned slow, and the teller windows had bars that were decorative by then, but still made you feel the weight of the institution pressing down on you. A man named Raymond Earl Briggs was sitting on the far side of a desk, and the manager across from him was closing a manila folder. The kind of place where men like Raymond had been handling their business for years without incident. Until today. In the doorway, a man in a canvas jacket and a dust-creased tan Stetson had stopped walking. He had come in to use the notary. He had a simple errand, and he was already late getting back to the location. He leaned one shoulder against the doorframe and didn't move. Here is the story. Raymond Earl Briggs had come home from Korea in March of 1952 with a Purple Heart, a plate in his left shoulder from a Chinese mortar round that had landed 6 feet from his position at the Chosin Reservoir in November of 1950, and approximately $40 in his pocket. He was 24 years old, and he had spent 14 months in a place so cold that men lost fingers in their sleep. He had watched men he knew die in positions they held because no one told them to let go. He had watched the Yalu River freeze over from a hillside that had no name on any map he had ever seen. He came back to Kingman because Kingman was where he was from. His father had died of a coronary while Raymond was in the Chosin, and the telegram had reached him 3 weeks late. His mother was renting a 2-room house on the west side of town and working alterations at a dress shop on Beale Street for 60 cents an hour. She had kept his father's tools in the shed behind the house, and she had not moved them. Raymond found work driving a delivery route for a produce warehouse 3 weeks after he got off the bus. The same route, same truck, same pre-dawn darkness 6 days a week, starting at 3:40 in the morning and ending in the early afternoon when the cold of the cab had already settled into his shoulder for the day. He bought his mother's 2-room house from her landlord in 1955 for $2,300. He paid it off in 4 years. He did that route for 7 years in total, and he was never once late. In the spring of 1959, the man who ran the produce warehouse offered Raymond the chance to buy the building and the route for $12,000. The man was 68 and had no sons, and he had watched Raymond drive that route for 7 years without once being late and without once complaining about the plate in his shoulder that made cold mornings a particular kind of misery. He gave Raymond 90 days. Raymond saved $4,200. He walked into the First National Bank of Kingman in October of 1959 and presented his figures to the branch manager, a man named Gerald Phelps, who had the kind of face that had never been in the cold somewhere it didn't have to be. Gerald Phelps was polite. He explained that the bank's position was that Raymond's collateral was insufficient. He explained that the loan committee had reviewed the application. He used phrases like institutional guidelines and lending parameters. He slid the folder closed the way a man closes a door he has closed many times before. He told Raymond it was too late in the quarter to revisit the matter. Raymond sat still for a moment, the kind of stillness that comes from learning at great cost, in places most people will never see, that some things are not worth arguing about. He put his hands flat on his knees. He nodded once, like a man accepting weather. Gerald Phelps asked if Raymond had any further questions. Raymond said he didn't think so. Have you ever watched a man absorb something like that and say nothing, because he has learned that there is nothing to say? Drop your state in the comments. I want to know how far this story reaches. The chair in the far corner of the lobby scraped back slow across the tile. Not fast. Not with any particular weight behind it, Just the sound of a man standing up from a chair he had been sitting in for the better part of 10 minutes, quietly, while the room had its business. He crossed the lobby the way a man crosses a room, when the hard part is already done and he is simply going where he is already going. He walked up to Gerald Phelps's desk, and he stood there until Phelps looked up at him. He was a large man and he was in work clothes, and Phelps did not recognize him yet, and in the 2 or 3 seconds before he spoke the lobby went the kind of quiet that a room goes when something real is about to happen. He looked at Phelps. He said, "Open the folder." Phelps said he was sorry. He was with a customer. The man pulled the other chair around from the side of the desk and sat in it. He set his hat on his knee. "I know you are," he said. "Open the folder." Phelps looked at him for another moment, and then he looked past him toward the teller windows, and the 2 women there had both stopped what they were doing and were watching, and Phelps opened the folder. The man read it. He didn't take long. He picked up the pen from the edge of Phelps's desk, and he wrote a name and a phone number on the corner of the paper, and he pushed it across. He said, "Call that number and tell them to post $4,000 against this account by end of business today." Phelps said he wasn't sure the bank could process. "It isn't complicated," the man said. His voice had dropped about half a step. It didn't go hard. It just went quiet. "Raymond here has $4,200, and this building is worth 3 times the loan. You need $800 more to feel comfortable. I have a problem you can fix." Phelps looked at the number on the paper. His face did something. Not quite shame, not quite recognition. Something in between. One of the tellers said a name. She said it the way a person says a name when they're not sure they should say it out loud. Raymond Earl Briggs looked up from the desk for the first time in 2 minutes. The man in the canvas jacket was looking at Phelps. "Draw the paperwork," he said. Today, Raymond tried to say something. The man turned to him, and there was nothing in his face that asked for gratitude or wanted it. "You drove that route in the cold for 7 years," he said. "You earned that building. I'm not doing you a favor. I have a problem you can solve." Raymond Briggs looked at him. He started to say something and stopped. His mouth closed. "The shoulder," the man said. "I need a man who drove in that cold and kept showing up. I'm making a picture up in Sedona in the spring. The equipment truck needs a driver who won't complain about early hours." He stood up. He put his hat back on. "It isn't charity," he said. "It's back pay." He walked out of the lobby. The door swung shut behind him. Gerald Phelps sat with the folder open on his desk for a long moment, and then he picked up the phone. Raymond Earl Briggs took ownership of the Kingman Produce Building on November 3, 1959. He drove that same route for the next 11 years, now for himself. He hired 2 more drivers by 1963. By 1967, he was running 4 routes across 3 counties and supplying 7 grocery stores and 2 hospital cafeterias between Kingman and the Nevada line. The plate in his shoulder never stopped hurting in the cold. He never once mentioned it to a customer. He drove the equipment truck for the Sedona production in the spring of 1960. He showed up at 3:40 in the morning, every morning for 6 weeks, and he was never late once. The man who had arranged it stopped by the truck on the last morning of the shoot and handed him an envelope. Raymond opened it later. There was a check inside and a handwritten note on hotel stationery. It said, "Problem solved." The check was for $200 more than the agreed rate. Raymond kept the note in the glove box of his truck for the next 14 years. His son, Donald Ray Briggs, graduated from Arizona State University in 1971 with a degree in agricultural business. He came back to Kingman and worked the routes alongside his father for 3 years before Raymond's shoulder finally made driving impossible. Donald took over the routes in 1974 and ran them for 31 years. He sold the business in 2002 for more money than his father had ever seen in one place, and the first thing he did was pay off the mortgage on the house his grandmother had rented on the west side of town, where his own daughter was living by then with her 2 children. Donald had a habit he picked up from his father. When he drove past a man sitting at the edge of a desk and looking at his hands, in a bank, in a lawyer's office, in the waiting area of the county land office, he would stop for a minute and listen. He did that 11 times over the course of his life. He helped 5 of those people in specific ways that cost him something. He never talked about it. He said he was solving a problem. On the wall of the house his grandmother had rented, behind a frame Donald's daughter bought at a shop in Flagstaff, is a photocopy of the loan agreement from the First National Bank of Kingman, dated November 3, 1959. The original is in a fireproof box in Donald's house. It is the only document from that era that Raymond Briggs saved. He kept everything else in the glove box of the truck. The note stayed there until the truck wore out, and when the truck went to the yard, Raymond took the note out of the glove box and put it in the box with the loan papers and a small bronze plate the Army sent him in 1952 that he had never once displayed. The afternoon light comes through the kitchen window of that house and moves across the frame on the wall every day at about 4 o'clock. It stays for maybe 20 minutes. Then it moves on, and the frame stays. John Wayne never told anyone, not the director on that picture, not the cast and crew who had watched it happen in town and put the pieces together later, not in any interview, not in any letter anyone has ever turned up. He told the story of Raymond Briggs the same way Raymond Briggs had driven that route in the cold, quietly, without asking anyone to notice, because that is not the kind of man he was. There are men who notice the people a room has decided not to see. Not many. They don't announce themselves, and they don't explain themselves afterward. They sit in the corner and they watch, and then, when something small tips them over, they stand up and cross the room and do what needs to be done. And then they go back to their own business. Raymond Briggs spent the rest of his life not quite able to explain it to people who asked. He'd say the man had needed a driver. He'd say it worked out for everybody. He'd look at his hands when he said it, the way a man looks when he knows that the real version of the story is too much to give to strangers. If this story reached you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't yet. There are more stories like this one, and every one of them deserves to be told. And unfortunately, they don't make men like John Wayne anymore.